So one of the reasons to the emergency
Pledge of Allegiance. I've been too many games.
I'm not singing. Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I want to welcome everyone, and Mr. Keen is going to go around and do audience introductions.
Mary Ann Hutchinson, Rumford Times.
Darcy Klein, Rumford resident.
Charlie Swan, principal at Dirigo Elementary.
Jason Long, principal at Dirigo Middle School and curriculum coordinator for the district.
Kurt Rowley, teacher at Dirigo High School and bar coordinator.
All right, thank you very much. We do have adjustments to the agenda. Could I get a motion, please? And the second? We'll do a roll call.
Dawn,
Yes.
Larry, Kathleen,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Tina,
Yes.
Natalie,
Yes.
Barbara,
Yes,
Brad,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
Carl.
Yes.
all right. Minutes, the minutes of the October 10th. 2023 board meeting. Could I have a motion, please?
So move.
And a second?
Second.
Comments, questions, revisions? Seeing none, roll call?
Dawn,
Not voting.
Larry, Kathleen,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Tim,
Yes.
Tina,
Yes.
Natalie,
Not voting.
Barbara,
Yes,
Brad,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
Carl.
Not voting.
okay. Public comment. This is the time the public can make a comment respectfully. You may have a question. We may not have that answer, may have to get back to you. Is there anybody online? Anybody here? Okay, seeing none. Communications.
No new communications.
Lost our address. All right, the new business is the bar overview. So you guys got the floor.
There. So as you've been told, we do have bar at Derigo High School now. I am very pleased to say that Kurt Rowley took the bar coordinator position. That was very gracious of him, so I thank him for that. We can go to the next slide when you're ready. All right, so I think the first question is like, what is BAR? It is a research-backed model. It's focused on strengthening the relationships in our schools, improving achievement, and reducing high-risk student behavior. One of the things that we really heard a lot during our training was that in BAR, we know it's the same students and the same teachers, but we're going to get better results. That's what we're looking to do through BAR. So there are 8 strategies that go together in BAR, and they all intentionally build relationships, staff to staff, staff to student, and student to student. We use real-time data, and it helps us to achieve concrete academic, social, and emotional outcomes for every student. So these are the units. First, we focus on the whole student. So when we look at a student, we look at all aspects of that student. What are their academic grades? What's their attendance like? Are they participating on an extra or co-curricular activity? Have they reached out for help from anybody? So we look at everything about the student that we know. BAR also provides professional development. They came to this school right here in this cafeteria, did 2 full days with all of the high school staff members. And I mean, all of them, our secretaries, our ed techs, our teachers, everybody came to the training. There were 2 people that were out that day. Well, one was hired afterwards and they did an online BAR training. And then we had one other person who was out in and out those 2 days and they did the online training as well. They have a iTime curriculum and they're really short lessons that take 10 to 15 minutes. We rotate them through English, science, social studies, math. So 1 week, the English department will do 1 iTime curriculum activity, and they're really getting to know each other, building team around in their classrooms. So students feel connected to other students, they feel connected to the teacher. We have teams that meet. We have small teams, we call them small blocks, we have big blocks, and then we have what we call community connect blocks. I'm going to go through those in just a minute, so I'll go to the next slide. We do hold regular meetings, so the small block, and again, I'll go through this a little bit more in a minute. They meet Monday, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, depending on what grade level they're talking about. And then big block meets on our late arrival Wednesdays. We conduct community connect meetings. We meet once a week, and community connect is when a student gets to tier 3, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. And that is when we need to have additional support beyond just the staff in the school. Part of BAR is really connecting with families. So I've asked all of the high school staff in the first 2 weeks of school to connect with their Cougar Paw families, to reach out so that they know they have a connection. And then I also have organized what I call office hour times for each of the staff members at the high school, and they're required during that time to reach out to families. So either calling or emailing or somehow connecting with our families so that they feel engaged with the school. And then BAR also engages administrators. So myself and Mr. Carvis were at the trainings, and we're part of the BAR process here at school. Next slide, please. So far this year, we've been trained. We've been holding small block and big block meetings. We have iTime lessons happening every week, and we have community connect meetings. And I'm going to go a little bit into those in just a second with the next one. So blocks. In small blocks, for example, any teacher who works with freshman students meets on Monday. They have a 25-minute block period. And they look at tier 1 students. So students that they feel like might just be beginning to struggle a little bit, or they have a little bit of concerns about. So they discuss those students, they establish a goal to work on. So if the student's goal is, let's say, attendance, like their grades are pretty good, but they're missing a day a week and more school than we'd want, they might say the goal for the student is to attend school regularly and not to miss more than 1 day a month or whatever. And then whoever is already connected to that student sits down with that student, explains that goal, talks to them, and then they track that goal. Is that happening over time? Are they attending more regularly? So they'll come back and talk about that student in a week or two. Big blocks, that's the entire Derigo High School staff. So those are tier 2 students. So students that are maybe struggling a bit more in our school. They've already tried some of the smaller goals with them. Now they're looking for everybody in the school sits down. We talk about this student. We talk about who's connected to the student. What does the student need to do to be more successful? And again, we come up with a goal for that student. We talk to that student about that goal. Let the parents know what the goal is. Like, we try to get everybody on board with, this is the goal we're working on with this student to try to help them to be more successful at Derigo High School. And they come back every Wednesday morning for big blocks. So we might check in and be like, I'm just going to use, hey, how's Barbara doing? Remember the goal? Who talked to her about it? Who connected with parents? Have we seen any improvement this week? Okay, it looks like it's better. Let's wait a couple weeks. We'll come back and talk about Barbara again. So we just kind of help support those students in a higher level than the small block tier 1 groups. Next slide, please. And then the community connect is tier 3. So this has the administrators are on it, the social workers on it, the nurse, the guidance, any outside agencies that might already be working with the student, and parents. We gather to really try to put the whole village around a student that might be struggling. So let's say we have a student has had substance abuse issues, and that's come to light at school and it's impacting their education. So we might have, like, the Larry Labonte Center, we might bring them in and see if they can work with this student. We have the parents on board. Like, it takes everybody's efforts to work with this. It's not a large number of students, but they need more support than tier 1 or tier 2. So that's what the Community Connect is for in BAR. Next slide, please. So the iTime, as I said before, it happens weekly, and it just rotates. It takes 15, 20 minutes, sometimes even 10. One teacher said it took about 5 minutes. That's just like utilizing and building relationships among students, among staff and students, and just making everybody feel like they're part of the community and helping them figure out where their place is at Derigo High School and how they can be a good person, basically, is what we're looking for. Next slide. And that's kind of what it is. I come back to that same students, same teachers, better results, questions or comments. I did put a few things in your folder. You have what is bar and bar in schools, and then you have our first site visit, because under this bar program, the coach actually comes to Derigo High School, meets with our bar coordinator, Kurt. We'll watch eye times in the classrooms. We'll watch a small group or a big block meeting or a community connect meeting and give us feedback on like how we might be able to improve our process. So we do have coaching that will be in our district 4 times in the course of the year. Looking at you, Kurt, I couldn't quite remember. Yep. Go ahead, Brad.
What does it cost us to use this, implement it?
So it's not costing us anything, because this is something that the Department of Education put out as an opportunity for all schools across the state of Maine. And so I just decided we decided this was what we wanted to do at Derigo High School. We knew we wanted to improve ourselves and our students' outcomes. So it seemed like a good opportunity that wasn't going to cost us anything.
Thank you.
Larry?
Yep, perfect question. And the reason that we signed on with bar is because this fits what we want to do. We want to increase the academic performance of our students at Derigo High School. We want to make sure that more and more students are successful at the end of their Derigo High School career and know what they want to go on and do and feel like they're competent to go on and do something post-high school. So basically it's to strengthen our academic and behavioral success at Derigo High School.
But Larry, your mic isn't working. I'm sorry. Could we check his mic maybe?
Yep. Well, wait a minute.
Are you getting positive reinforcement from the families, or is there a little bit of a fight back there? We don't want to be involved type thing?
Yes.
Point A or B?
There are times that when you call a family, you get immediate and full support. And then there are times that it's hard for that parent because of their work schedule or whatever else is going on in their lives. I'm going to come back to, after 37 years, I do believe that all parents want their kids to do the best possible. So again, it's up to us to try to figure out, if they can't get into us, how do we continue to ask them and invite them in until they feel comfortable doing so.
Kathleen?
How many students are involved in this bar program, or percentage wise?
All of them.
All of them.
So they may be a tier 1 needing nothing from us, but we would just go through, like the freshman class, we would go through every student, and we would initially and be like, yep, they're good. They don't need anything. They're doing great. So we talk about all students, but the number of students that are in tier 1, 2, or Community Connect, I don't have that number off the top of my head. I think like I do the Community Connect version of this, and I see them all. So I'm going to say there's not more than probably 10 kids per grade level on the charts that are getting tier 1, 2, or 3 that are more in depth than just the, hey, Kathleen's doing great. We'll just keep, she might come up 2 months from now, just as we're running through the whole group again, but you don't need a goal built around it. So I think 10 or 12 at most per grade level is on our list.
Brad?
Is this a redundancy with restorative practices with George Conant? They sound somewhat alike?
So we don't do restorative practices per se at the high school. We haven't had that training.
Okay.
So I think that restorative practices at the middle school will support this as we move up. The kids aren't going to be surprised that we're looking at them, talking about them, having them help us figure out a goal that they're working on and problem solve with us.
Liz, have we ever had anything like that before here in some form or other?
So a number of years ago, pre-Pam Doyen, but back when Mr. Early was here, they had a student assistance team, which was similar. This is just a little more programmatic, a little more concrete and strategic on how you do it. So they were used to that a while ago, so it fit the philosophy of knowing our kids and really talking about and supporting each and every kid individually.
So when you talk to the parents, what kind of roadblock? What would you call their roadblock? They don't have time or they don't?
So some of it is work schedules. It's hard to get a hold of them. Some of it's they have their own things that they're working on, so it's hard to commit to working on something else. But again, most parents, even if they can't come in and actively be part of the team, they're willing to be like, yep, I will talk to them about that. Yes, I will support that. You know, they're good. Like parents want what's best for their kids.
Oh, I'm sure they do. I just wonder.
I remember saying for my staff quite a number of years ago, parents send us the best kids they have. Like
Right.
they don't keep the good ones and hide them under the bed.
I don't think
Like they
anybody
send
does
us what they have and they want their kids to do well. It's
Yeah.
just they're not always available themselves to be part of our team, but
I just didn't know if there was any negative pushback.
I have not had any. I don't know, Mr. Rowley, have you?
So like, say, when is this going to start? Right away?
It's already started.
It's already started.
They started, we had training the 2 days before school started. Well, you know, the freshman orientation day was rearranged and it started that week. And Adina is our coach and she gave us this report after her visit and she was incredibly impressed with, but again, they had SAT, so they kind of knew the format from before. Very impressed with how much the staff focuses on students and willingness to put goals in place and support them.
So at the end of the year, are you going to be able to tell how effective this was?
That is the plan. We have data. So we have last year's data that we've already compiled. And then we have weekly data, like attendance amounts, weekly attendance, grades, weekly grades, failing rates. So we use all of that each week is compiling. So yes, the plan is over time that we would see lower failing rates, higher attendance rates. That's our hope.
So like the goal would try to catch the kids from before they fall through the cracks,
Exactly.
more or less.
It's a strategic way to talk about every student, but in particular, those that might need a little extra support or a lot of extra support.
Larry,
It says in here that sometimes it involves more specialized staff such as school nurses, psychologists. I know when I was teaching, some of my special ed students, special needs had a social worker. Would they be involved? And the second part of that is that part of their IEP that they're going to be part of this BAR program?
So we have not put it in an IEP at this point, but we do not exclude students that have an IEP. So if a student with an IEP needs more than what they're getting in their IEP, they definitely would come through the process.
So would
And
that-
yes, those people would be invited to the meetings. Our special ed teachers already come to the small blocks and the big blocks. And then we would ask the specialized people if they got up to the Community Connect block.
Thank you.
One more question, if nobody else. Is this kind of a takeoff from social emotional learning?
It really is not, because we're not like, it's not touchy-feely. Neither Kurt nor I would be considered, I don't think, touchy-feely people. It's more about building relationships. I'm sorry, Kurt, I probably shouldn't have put you in the same boat that I'm in. It's more about how to function in a group, how to have those group skills, how to work together as a team, how to interact in a school setting or a work setting after you get out of high school. So it's not about I don't know, kumbaya. It's not kumbaya. I don't mean to say that in a negative way either.
I was exposed to the social emotional learning and I didn't think that it was very effective when I had something to do with it years past. So I was just curious if it was gonna be an arm of that type thing.
I don't look at it as social emotional, and even the time things, they're more about team building and interactions, not about we have a social worker if students need more support in the social emotional realm. This is merely about relationships and being a functional part of Derigo High School.
couple questions. Who's doing the data?
So Kurt is our bar coordinator. So Kurt does some of it, and then our guidance department does others, like they put in the weekly failure rates. The guidance secretary also puts in the weekly attendance percentages and all of that stuff, but it's a combination of people.
Okay, because I do remember the students, the SAT, I remember them. Because it was in a lot of documentation, and then we go, well, we don't really have a student assistance team. But I know we had evolved for the at-risk kids. And so how does RTI go into that too? Or is that still just part of the academic part?
Yep. Nope, it's not just part of the academic part. So when we make a goal for a student, if they happen to be failing 2 or 3 classes, whatever, we might actually say the goal for the next 3 weeks is that they attend RTI classes, and we actually sign them up for it and let the teachers know they're coming to your class for X, Y, and Z. So it does go together. And I should clarify, the bar coordinator position is a pretty big undertaking, and most people were touching their noses when I'm like, is anybody interested in being the bar coordinator? And then in working with Kurt, who had a lot of expertise in the SAT previously, he had a class that only had, I think, 0 students in it. So we, instead of changing him and having doing an elective, I left him an open prep period. So every other day he has a 90-minute block to do the bar work, so that he doesn't have to be inundated with that. And then out of curriculum work time, I've allocated up to 10 hours outside of work too, if he needs it, but wanted to make sure that we acknowledge the fact that it is a lot of work, and Kurt is doing that for us.
Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you, Kurt. Yeah, come up to the podium.
So I'm really sold on this because it just is so comprehensive, and the training that we had was really in depth. I want to give you some idea of how it actually works. We have each cohort has a spreadsheet, and any teacher can add a name to any spreadsheet at any time, which brings them up for a very disciplined 5-minute discussion. And in that 5 minutes, we identify strengths of the student, we identify areas of concern, we take a look at all their grades, and then try to come up with a SMART goal for them. And the beauty of it is, I think, instead of taking a kid that is clearly struggling, a kid that is failing, as an example, today we had a student that is usually, his grades are usually top notch, and he's terribly failing one class. So he's on somebody's radar. We get him up on the board, and then we have a whole discussion with the entire group that, again, is very quick, identify strengths, areas of concern, and quickly come up with a plan. And if that doesn't, a week later, and nothing has happened, or it's gotten worse, then they'll go up to a level 2, and then our SMART goal becomes a little bit more intensive. And then it might go to level 3, and which we end up in a community connect meeting. So there are, like you mentioned, no kids falling through the cracks, because any kid, even the slightest little change in behavior might prompt a discussion with a team of maybe 10 teachers. So I really, and as far as George Conant's program, I had that training. And the iTime activities dovetail really nicely with that. Some of it is connection. Kids definitely have to work together, and the teachers are encouraged also to participate in them. So there's a connection between the teachers and students that they might not have had. As an example, I ran one today. It's not just about connections and all that. It's in this activity, kids had to envision themselves 20 years from now receiving a Person of the Year award, and talk about how they got there, what the steps might have been to get there. It gets kids thinking ahead a little bit, thinking about a bigger picture than just their day-to-day, drama, I guess.
Thank you, Kurt. All right, next, you going back up or you're gonna let them? Okay. Do I need to look at the screen? Okay. Huh? You see- No. Is it? Try again.
Is this on? There we are.
There you.
All righty. So I provided a more in-depth presentation for the curriculum committee earlier today. But there was a request for the full board for an explanation of the tier 2 designations, what that means and what we're going to do about it. So I'm going to present kind of an abbreviated version of that now. If you could please click the button, Mr. Keen. Whoop. All right. So what are tier designations? So tier designations in general, it's part of the state's plan for the support of learning following federal guidelines. It has always been part of the picture for schools that receive Title I funding. They recently expanded their evaluation process over schools, whether you receive federal funds or not. So this past spring, they created new designations for the first time in a number of years due to COVID. And those designations were based on spring 2022 assessment data, as well as attendance data. Due to COVID-19, they did not use any of the data from 1920 or 2021. So the comparison was made between spring 2022 and test results from spring 2019. It's important to point out that in 2019, the state used an entirely different assessment system, like entirely different. The name of the assessment was Empower Maine or Empower Me. It was a criterion-based assessment. The assessment we used in 2022 and 2021 was I say regular NWEA, which is a diagnostic test. According to the Maine Department of Education, they understand that comparing those two data from those two assessments is not comparing apples to apples. However, a comparison had to be made for federal reporting purposes. And so they constructed their own calculation and identification process for that. And the way you were identified is that if you had any group with an academic deficit as well as attendance deficit, but I'm going to focus on the academic, any group with an academic deficit in 2018, 2019, and then that same group also had qualifying deficits in 2022. Okay. Then you were identified as a tier 2 school. All 3 schools in RSU56 were identified as tier 2. Please click the button. So here are the basics of what the tiers are. To be identified as tier 1, a school needs at least one subgroup to fall behind state expectations in attendance, which is measured by as chronic absenteeism, not truancy. I think that's an important difference. In the state of Maine, if you miss a total of 18 days for any reason, you're considered chronically absent. We have some students who annually go on a moose trip for a week. We have some students who show at the fair. We have students who may need to be hospitalized for a period of time. It makes no distinction. If you're absent for a total of 18 days over the course of the year, you're chronically absent no matter what. Anyhow, if that happens and you fall behind state expectations in achievement or growth in at least one of the academic categories, then you become tier 1. To be identified as tier 2, it's essentially the same criteria, but it happens over time. So that means that you had that criteria in 2018, 2019, as well as in 2022. To be a tier 3 school, this is the official statement. Tier 3 identified schools are Maine public schools receiving Title I funding where all eligible individual student groups have not met state expectations in all indicators. Okay, there are a number of tier 3 schools in Maine, many of them in interior Maine. You also have to be a Title I school. So even though the high school and the middle school, and a lot of high schools and middle schools in Maine have been designated as tier 2, unless you receive federal funds under Title I, you can't become tier 3. You are, as a tier 2 school, still expected to create a comprehensive needs assessment, but the rest of the federal program that comes with it is not an expectation, and you don't get any money. Within tier 3, there are its own 3 levels, all of which are designated as the highest level of need and come with different reporting requirements and different funding levels and things like that. Please click the button. So, having said all that, the reason why the 3 Dirigo schools were identified for tier 2 is because in 2018, 2019, we would have met the criteria for being tier 1. And then at least one of those subgroups still qualified in 2022 using a different test, a different calculation, and a different system of metrics. Okay. So now what's going to happen is we're going to present information about the elementary school. Charlie will do his own. I'll come back up for the middle school, and then Pam will talk about the high school. Are there any questions before I hand it to Charlie here?
Quick question. So 1819, we had a subgroup. Does it have to be the same subgroup that
Yes.
does it? Can't be a different one.
Well, you can have different ones.
Yeah.
If you wind up and they're all different, then you're still tier 1.
Okay.
But if the
But it's
same
the same
subgroup
group.
happens
Okay.
twice.
All right.
So in collecting the data for this presentation, I didn't focus on all of the possible data points. I selected the data points from 2018, 2019 that were then used to identify us because it was a pattern with the 2022 identification.
Okay.
Yes.
So how often would we be reassessed for something like that?
Yeah. My honest answer is I'm not sure. They don't do a full re-identification for the whole state every year. And at least in my time as your curriculum person, the state has changed the assessment so many times. We were using the what was it called? The Smarter Balance assessments, and the high schools were using the SATs. And then we moved to the Empower assessments. And then there was a year without any assessment. And then there was the NWEA. And starting last spring, we did the Maine through-year assessment. So every time they change the state's assessment program, they have to file an amendment. And so depending on how that amendment is written will also influence, to my understanding, whether they do a reassessment. So I don't know when the next will be. I think under the current application, you have, in order to be off the designation you're on, you have to have corrected every possible deficiency. It's either that or all subgroups no longer qualify. It's one or the other. Sorry, I'm not 100% sure.
Any other questions? I wish you would just say to them, you know, when you keep changing the assessments, you're not getting qualified data. Because you tell us that because you like data. And
I do like data. All right, here's Charlie.
All right. Thank you, Jason. So before I begin, I should have said this during public comments. We had the firefighters at our school today. So I want to thank the local firemen and Dan Carrier, the fire chief of Peru, for organizing and working with us on that. I should have said that during public comments. It has nothing to do with the stuff we're talking about here, but I wanted to say that. So to publicly thank them. So as Jason alluded to, and also thank you to Jason for putting this together, because he, as he always does, invested a lot of time into organizing this and made it very easy for Pam and I to kind of plop our information in here and to also kind of walk through this with you. So as Jason alluded to, I've been at the elementary school for 12 years now, and this is the 4th assessment. So that's an average of every 3 years. There's been a different assessment. When I first arrived, they had just finished at that time what was called SIPS, continuous improvement plan from the states in reading. We had like a year lag, and then we went into what would now be tier 2 or tier 3 in math. And Jason's highlighting that here. And we did a focus on math, and at the time, only 24% of grades 3 to 5 DES met or exceeded the state standard. And then that moved from 2016-17 to 2018-19, where we had moved it to 42%, and then it's kind of plateaued since then. But in 2018-19, when we were taking the Empower assessment, so 3 assessments ago, the groups that were identified, we had ELA students in the economic disadvantage group, so students with economic disadvantage in reading, and then we had both reading and math for students with disabilities. And then, Brian, if you want to move to the next. So in our designation, our recent designation, we had a state calculated score in 2021-22 of 75.1% of DES students in economic disadvantage category to earn the state's cut score or meets on the ELA assessment. And we had 67.1% of our students meet that. So there were 76 students in that subgroup at DES who completed the tests. That meant we missed that by 6 students not meeting that cut score. So that was one group. In 2021-22, state calculated a goal of 54% of students with disabilities category in ELA. We had 33.5%, so that we had missed that by 4 students in that category. And then the other one with disabilities in math, the state calculation was 46.8%. That was our target goal. We had 33.5, and so we missed that by 3 students. So this has not been necessarily a new process for me. I've been kind of working through it in different titles and different formats since I've been at the elementary school. So the big question is, what have we kind of been doing? Because though this information is out now, it's not certainly new information. And so our goal was to share kind of how we've been attacking this kind of issue or problem with what's going on in our schools. So the first part I'm going to talk about is ELA, and you saw that it had students with disabilities as one of the subgroups not meeting in ELA. So in 2016-17, our special ed department incorporated corrective reading and reading mastery. These are 2 very specific targeted reading programs that address specific needs, and they move through a sequential order, supporting students all the way through. So this is the special ed department beginning to target their group of students who are struggling in the area of reading. In 17-18, we hired a school psychologist to manage our Title I program. This was huge because she has been organizing not only our intervention, but training related to that, data analysis related to that. And that's been a critical piece of looking at kind of where students are struggling. In 2021, we redesigned our approach to intervention, began a data-focused referral process to our Tier 2 Title I intervention, and restructured our student success team. So what that basically is saying is we made it more effective and efficient for us to kind of figure out what students are struggling academically and behaviorally, and then what supports do they need, do we need to provide them to try to help them be successful. In 21-22, we began training in-house with science of reading. Brian, you can move on. In 22-23, last year, we implemented our new reading program, and that is a very robust and rigorous program, which is based in the science of reading, and it incorporates science and social studies. So part of our focus on improvement, not just special ed or economically disadvantaged students with reading, but our whole school with reading was adopting this reading program, which has been, again, very rigorous, but very very interesting and kind of awesome on the side to see it implemented in our school. And I can go into that another time about our reading program. In 2022-23, we began the letters, and I talked a little bit about that at our last meeting. Learning essentials for teachers of reading and spelling for grades K and 1. We started it with those teachers. This year, we began for all of our teachers, all pre-K to grade 5 teachers have this 60-hour in-depth training about what is reading, how do you identify reading weaknesses, and then how do you target and focus support and intervention for those students. 2022-24, we've had ongoing work with our school psychologists on screening, diagnostic, and monitoring our assessments that we're giving and how to use them, how to identify students from them, and how to support students through intervention as we look at that data. And I do want to highlight this. One of the areas in improving academic instruction in our school has been a focus on supporting kids through social work support and counseling support, where you have students that come to school that are emotionally dysregulated and need support. And if we're not able to provide and give that to them, not only does that individual student, that student's maybe not able to learn and grow, but sometimes they are unable to kind of be in a place to allow other people to learn and grow too. So that's been a critical piece of attacking this problem. All right, let's move to math. Some of this is similar, so I won't cover the ones that are similar, but in 2017 special ed, again, they adopted Number Worlds as a tier 2 math intervention program for students with math support in their IEPs. Again, I talked about the hiring of our school psychologists. I talked about our transformation in our tiered system. And then in 2021-22, so 2 years ago, we implemented a new math program, and it was specifically selected because it was not as word-based as our previous program. It was a focus on math skills, and it really was a target towards students who were average and below average in math, which a large group, according to our testing, that's where they were performing. So we really wanted to implement a program that was specifically addressing those kids and their needs. Then in 2021-22, we contracted with a professor from UMF to provide PD and support for DES staff. Last year, we formed a math leadership team, and that was designed to examine math data, provide professional development, and really provide leadership in the area of math for our school. That's ongoing this year. In 22-23, Title I in special education, that just happened over our workshop day, received training and began implementing connecting math concepts as tier 3 program. Again, in 2020 through 24, we've had our school psychologists leading support. And again, I mentioned the social work component in there for targeting support in math as well. So quite a list of things, but those are things that we've been doing for 4 or 5 years at DES in response to understanding that different pockets of our students are not meeting expectations, but also as a whole trying to improve the academic performance of students in our school.
Any questions? Go ahead, Tina.
So at the beginning, you were talking about how you missed cutoffs by so many students. Does that mean we missed the next tier by that many students, or those particular students didn't get the help they needed?
So that we were designated because X number of students didn't meet that criteria that was set.
So we just didn't fall into the next tier essentially. Okay. And then skipping ahead a bit into the reading programs and the spelling programs, they're more advanced than they used to be by quite a bit. How is that actually going?
So yeah, that's a good question. And I don't want to go into a whole lot with that because I certainly can come in another time and talk about more specifically about our reading program. But like I said, our reading program is very rigorous. It incorporates science and social studies content into the reading components, which is more engaging for kiddos. The great components of our program is it's a pre-K to grade 5, so it's consistent all the way through. So as long as a child starts with us in pre-K and goes up through, they're going to have consistent programming, and there shouldn't be any major gaps in their learning in terms of reading. I think the hardest challenge was last year when we implemented it. It requires sustained attention from our kids. So some of our kids in the older grades may be asked for an hour to be able to kind of sustain in kind of an academic mindset or an academic kind of instructional period. That they were not used to that. And that's something that's still, do they need to be? Yeah, that's something we're pushing them towards, because everything we ask them to do, like taking this test, is a 45-minute to an hour test. So being able to sit and focus and do these things for a period of time is an essential skill that they need. So that was probably one of the hardest walls we hit, was just growing our students' ability to attend to the academic task for longer. That's decreased over time. Students are, can still give you 15 to 20 minutes, but then typically they need a break to go and do something. And we still do that, but we're still trying to kind of grow that a little bit. So it's been good and bad. Tina, I would say overall, there's been some, like, the
I've seen some
vocabulary
samples
enrichment
of
has
the
been.
words, and I'm thinking,
Yeah,
for my second grader, I'm thinking
yeah,
that's
it's
extremely.
Like, I'm in a first grade room and they're learning about body systems, and they're able to tell you, this is what this system does. This is what this does. It's really cool to see that. Vocabulary is pretty rich, I would say. To me, that's all good stuff. And again, it's incorporating that science and social studies, which is the engagement factor for kids.
But putting, I know that's not your subject right now, but putting words that are more difficult, isn't that giving our kids the opportunity to fall lower on scores if they're not able to achieve those?
Sometimes, I mean, when you want to elevate vocabulary and you want to do this, you like, when you're reading to kids at home, you want to read above their level at homes, because you're exposing them to vocabulary that's above their level. And so part of that's what they're doing. They're exposing vocabulary that is above their level. But the program's really divided into two parts, and one is a skill. So that's where in the lower grades, where you would really focus on phonics and things that are skill-based reading, things in the classroom. And then the other one's knowledge. So that's building background knowledge. So building concepts about what was the Renaissance, or, what are body systems, or what are volcanoes, and building that vocabulary that they'll carry through and then again have later on in either middle school or high school science and social studies. Because unfortunately, prior to that, a lot of times our kids would come into the middle school and high school and have vocabulary deficits because they've never been taught those vocabulary words in the elementary school. And so they were coming into science and social studies in the middle school and high school and kind of behind the 8 ball.
So they're aware of the vocabulary words and what they mean, they just can't spell them.
That could be, yeah. Spelling's part of the issue, and that's another part. But exposure to vocabulary, especially at a higher level than what they're reading, is always something we encourage.
For the longest time, there was no spelling, there was no vocabulary, it was focused more, let's just write, because I know no
Mario,
grammar.
Opening a whole can that I
Yes.
could go on for hours talking about.
So I
and
mean, going back to the things, but keeping does make.
one of the things of this reading program is definitely a return to the foundational and fundamental approach to reading. And certainly that's something that, again, had been lost for many years in the world of education, and certainly as the principal of the elementary school, very happy to see it return.
So how are we incorporating this back into the older students? Like, I have a 7th grader who still can't spell simple words, and part of that is just him, but I'm constantly, correcting, well, this is how we spell like, this is how we spell was, so how are we bringing that back to those students?
So again, you kind of get me off the course here a little bit, and that's and Jason could probably say what they're doing, but when you teach a phonics-based approach to reading, kids have skills that allow them to attack words and allow them to sound them out versus trying to memorize or guess them. And that memorizing and guessing content is not an effective strategy for spelling, for sure. But being able to understand the rules of reading, which is what is taught, as well as the rules of phonics when you're at a younger grade, that will carry through in terms of spelling success in the future. It's not immediate at all. It's not, it won't, it's not a cure that you drink and it's going to be better tomorrow. But it's a long-term approach that, and we're, in my view, finally on the right path with it.
Brad?
I hear a lot of acronyms, all these different programs. Do we need more programs, or do we need to simplify it?
I don't, if you're talking reading wise, I don't need I don't feel like in terms of my core reading program, I need anything else to support my kids in that term. There are things that we are still working on in the intervention realm for kids who are struggling, and we're trying to line them up. But in terms of our core reading, I believe that the investment we made in this program was 100% the right direction, and something I think that will over time pay dividends for us.
Thank you.
That I'm the opposite. I can spell, but I can't say it very well, even in French. All right, Jason.
Before I jump into the middle school, I'll say first, always welcome to have a parent principal conference and talk. I think that the two questions that you asked, one is a question that's addressed with core program, and one is a question that's addressed with intervention. So when you look at a 7th grade student, who's a good student, by the way, and that student has deficits, to me, that's evidence that you need a more rigorous academic program at the elementary level. And that is what we have now. Like when we emerged as a district from 10, we knew we wanted to be able to chart a different direction. Some of the programs are being alluded to are now being largely discredited. What we have has the highest possible rating from Ed Reports. We were able to use some of the COVID funds to get started with those resources, because obviously we have a need in English. And what's really exciting to me as an educator who's a social studies teacher, like science and social studies are fully integrated, because if you just teach a young person how to decode, but you don't teach them about the world, they'll never be able to comprehend. And so some of that really ambitious vocabulary, it's about exposure in the 2nd grade, not yet about mastery of spelling. They're getting the spelling through the skills section. And then the question you raise about, so what about the kids who didn't start with this great program in pre-K? That's an intervention question. So and when I present my building report later, I'll talk a little bit about the interventions that are at the middle level. And then if you have a question for that, pop then. The other thing I have to add for Charlie, because I think that we have a tendency to talk a lot about our deficits and not talk about what we're doing for some of our strongest students. And that's a disservice. Something that Charlie has done going into this year that came from his math leadership team is coming up with some advanced math options at the elementary level for some of the older grades there, because there absolutely are students who are ready to accelerate, and not necessarily just GT gifted and talented students. I don't quite know how I'm going to work with an incoming 6th grade class next year with tiered math levels, but I'm going to figure it out because it's a good problem to have. And I'm excited that the core math program that we have is cognizant of the reality of our reading needs. And the math has more to do with math and less to do with reading comprehension than the old math program Envision. But we still then need to make sure that we're challenging our strongest students, and Charlie is tackling that head on, which I think should be mentioned. All right, TWK DMS. So in 1819, we did not meet state expectations in attendance, plus insufficient achievement and growth according to the Empower assessments in math, with 2 of our subgroups, economically disadvantaged students and white students. It is interesting to note, however, that the overall MAP scores in 2022 were actually way higher than 2019. I know this because although the state used the Empower assessments in 19, I was also using the NWEA and had longitudinal data until the 3-year assessment changed that. So in other words, the middle school in those areas improved on that assessment, comparable 19 to 2022, but in 2022, the state changed how it determined what is considered meets. I'm not trying to sound defensive, but my kids made growth, and yeah. So I can't click the button. Brian, click the button. Thank you. So in 2022, the state calculated its goal, which was a state average of all students assessed of 82.7%, was the goal we were supposed to meet. Our figure was 74.5% out of 157 students. So we missed that particular requirement by 13 students. And among our economically disadvantaged students, we missed its own figures by a single student. Would you please click the button. So I did not provide 4 slides, as did Charlie. I'm only providing 1 slide with an example of some math things that we've done that I think are critical in the last few years. I didn't go all the way back to the start of the district. We adopted our new core math program that is aligned with the district-wide math program's scope and sequence. What I mean by that is that the math program that's used at the elementary school ties into the math program that's used at the middle school, which ties into the math program that's used at the high school. And for the first time that anyone can remember, we actually have a K-12 math program, which should pay dividends over time. We've had training on a new math intervention program called Connecting Math Concepts, in addition to what Charlie had mentioned, which is Number Worlds, which has been primarily used by special education. We reorganized our math intervention system to reach more students. We did that by creating a daily 45-minute RTI block. That's for all 6th graders. Not every 6th grader winds up needing math, but we use the data to create small groups, and many of those small groups are indeed for math. And math intervention is tricky because you really have to, not every kid needs the same thing, right? So having some targeted ways to put kids in front of the right material that they need. There's a trick to that. And we use fluid groupings, and they meet daily for 45 minutes at the 6th grade level. At the 7th and 8th grade level, our math interventionist position works alongside every regular ed 7th and 8th grade math class. And then the last period of the day, those 7th or 8th graders with the highest needs in math are pulled into an intervention group during what would otherwise be their study hall. So they don't, I think one of the problems sometimes with intervention is kids miss the core program to get the extra help, but then they're never going to catch up because they missed the core program. So we're trying as much as we can to offer the extra help, not when the core program is being offered. And those are the things that we've done in terms of math, or some of them anyway. We've also sent teachers to national conferences and tried to train up our math teachers to be the best that they can be. And they're pretty dang good, actually. I don't know if you've met Mrs. Gilbert, but she knows what she's doing. And our 6th grade math teacher, Mrs. McFarland, is doing a great job as well. Are there any questions? Thank you.
So I'm the shortest here. So in 2018-19, Derigo High School didn't meet state expectations with ELA and math for economically disadvantaged and for our white students. And at the time, DHS did not have the required assessment participation for students with disabilities. So we did not have them scored in that time. Next slide. In 2021, our goal was 83.7%, 40.5%. Did not meet their scores according to the state. And this was in with our white population. We did not meet the required participation rate. We also did not meet our math scores. We were supposed to be 88.1 and we were 54.7. And again, we did not reach our required participation rate. And we also did not meet it with our economically disadvantaged students in ELA or in math. And in both of those, here's the story each time, we did not meet the required participation rate. So that was our overwhelming problem in all of those areas, is that we did not have enough students taking the test. So this is what we've done. Our participation rate, by the way, has improved greatly already. So we've encouraged more students to participate. I did this through public events, like at the assembly. We kind of hoopla up the sophomores as they were headed into their state testing this year. We've offered makeup times. We've tried to get as many students as possible. So if they're out for a week and we have another week to finish up, we get them in one at a time and get it done. We've tried prizes and enticements, like they had free homecoming tickets if they took the test and they improved. We've had door prizes. We've tried all of those. So we have made improvements in our participation rate. So I'm pretty proud of that. And hopefully that will reflect in our data. In addition, we wrote a grant for an SRO to try to help mitigate that chronic absenteeism and truancy. I can tell you about that at another time because that's a little bit of bureaucracy as well, trying to get through to get that in place. But hopefully by December or January, we'll have an SRO on staff. Additionally, we're implementing BAR, and part of BAR is looking at attendance, so that will help us as well. And for academic purposes, we have really looked at clear syllabi with the standards attached for each course at Darragh High School. We've adopted new math programs to align with the standards that we have outlined in math. We've adopted a new Spanish program. We have after-school tutoring and summer school offerings happening. And the leadership team is focusing on student achievement. And we have tried to work more strategically with our intervention time. So really targeting students that need intervention in reading, writing, math, Spanish, whatever they happen to be in. So those are the things we're working on. As I said at the beginning, the story repeatedly was we did not have enough participation rate. So that was our first focus, is like getting kids in front of the test and taking the test. Any questions about the high school?
Go ahead, Brad.
These, the children in all the grades have any incentive to do this test?
So this test only happens in grade 10 at the high school. And so it's really hard because the students at the high school know that this test has no bearing on their academic score or their academic future or what they want to do post high school. So we really try to implore to them that this is about pride in Darragh High School and showing what you can do, because this is the test that the state is having us take, and that's what they're going to grade us on. So a lot of students don't find it the most valuable use of their time, I guess is the way I'll put it. Diana, is that accurate? Okay. So, but I will say that this current 10th grade this year, like, we did a little bit of hoopla at the assembly. I came in and talked to them before they started, and they really finished the test and were like, how come I can't see my score? Because that's usually how NWA works. So I really feel like they tried to put some pride and effort into this year. So I'm looking forward to seeing what that data shows when it comes up again through the state.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. All right, the next thing is the second reading of policy JLCD, administering medication to students. Could I have a motion, please?
Make a motion, we accept.
Okay, and a second? Comments, questions? It has not changed since the first reading. Roll call.
Dawn,
Yes.
Larry,
Yes.
Kathleen,
Yes.
Joy, Tim,
Yes.
Natalie,
Yes.
Barbara,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
Carl,
Yes.
Tina. Yes.
Old business.
So there are no Region 9 updates
That's
because
what
they
I
haven't
thought.
met since then, but I will give a strategic planning update. The team did meet last Monday. A plan was formulated on how we're going to move forward. At the November 20th meeting, the team will compile survey questions to collect data from staff, students, and community members. A community forum has been established for Saturday, December 16th from 9 to 11, sorry. And an invitation is going to be mailed to all of the mailboxes in Canton, Carthage, Dixfield, and Peru, so that they know when the forum is and they know how to access the survey, whether it's online or whether they want a hard copy here at school.
Okay, keep going.
All right. So as we've been alluding to tonight, the fall NWA through-year assessment, which is the state testing, has occurred in all 3 of our schools, with makeups concluding this week. The administrative team has started preparing for the 24-25 budget process. Mary Daly provided the team with a calendar of dates today and the rollout of the budget paperwork. And I'll be at the MSSA annual conference tomorrow in Augusta. So if you need me, please email. I'll be back obviously in the afternoon because I have some meetings. And then Barbara and Kathleen will be attending the Maine School Board Association conference on Thursday and Friday. Thank you to both of them for doing that. And I will call Mr. Long back up to the podium. And as he's coming up, I'll just report out stipends. Our dean of students at Darragh Elementary School will be Aaron Wainwright. And co-drama coach at the high school, middle school, actually it's elementary, high school, middle school, because they kind of cover grades 4 through 12, will be Leah Nolette. And resignations of such things, the co-drama coach, James Hamalainen, is the one that Leah will be replacing. And I also need to report out, sadly, the resignation of Tom Virgin, our head mechanic. He'll be resigning at the end of November. And I'll turn it to you, Mr. Long.
Thank you. Just gonna wait for. All right, thank you, Brian. So here comes the building report for the middle school. I always start just with baseline attendance data. Oh, nope. Nope, you've skipped several. Yep, there it is. So right now, these are our enrollment figures according to Power School. So our total enrollment right now is 167. Since the 1st of July, we've had 13 students withdraw and 15 students enroll. We had one more enroll, I think, yesterday. Enrollment remains steady. I included this time around because I know the board is interested in it. What our free reduced lunch figure is, that has a major implication for the state funding formula. So we have 56.02% as of yesterday of the students, the middle school qualify for free or reduced lunch. I want to thank my school nurse. She made some phone calls for us and reached out to any families that hadn't completed the form to try to invite them to complete it if they hadn't in the first case. It's not a requirement, but it's something that the federal government uses to make determinations. Brian, it went away. Okay.
Sorry, Jason, it wasn't showing up online. I think Brian's getting it to reload.
Cool. Thanks, Natalie.
Got it.
All right. Thank you. The next piece of attendance data that I share has to do with our truancy information. So there's truant as in it's been paused, like we're waiting to see if things are getting better or worse, or resolved because the student now regularly attends school. There's truant active, which means the student is still not regularly in school. And then I issue warning letters at a certain threshold based on grades. In the state of Maine, if you're in grades 7 and above, 10 cumulative days of unexcused absence results in a truancy. 6th grade and lower, it's 7. So currently we have none. You can see then the first number in those staggered digits is this year, then the past years. So you can see that in fall of 2020, we had quite a few students who at this point in the year were already receiving warnings, and that figure is well under control now. So currently we have 0 truancy cases. We have no students who received an official warning. However, we have 29 students who appear on track to be recorded as chronically absent because they've had at least 4 excused absences. That figure is down from 36 last year at this time. 12 of those 29 students missed 6 or more days, but their reasons included things like working at the fair, family hunting trips, major medical issues. It's more than just sick days, and some bereavement. So the state does not differentiate at all for the cause of absence toward chronic absenteeism. Please click the button. All right. In years past, I've provided really detailed versions of my school goals. This is simplified. It helps me focus. So my 2 goals this year are improve academic performance in both reading and math. That's been a goal every year I've been a principal. I put my percentage with a question mark because I'm still trying to learn how to use the new state assessment in order to set realistic goals based on it. But the 2 sort of driving principles behind my efforts right now are to better organize and implement response intervention practices and improve consistency and fidelity to school-wide academic expectations. The name of the game this year at Deergo Middle School is consistency. We are on the same page. Rebecca Fletcher gave me a giant pencil that I think was awarded to her, perhaps when you were the principal there. and it's like this big, and she found it when she was cleaning her house. And I said, this is perfect. I got a big pencil to get us all on the same page. So I literally walked in the first day of school holding it like Hacksaw Jim Dugan over my shoulder. And that's been the push. We're trying to be more consistent. And then to improve the school learning climate and safety, I would measure that by having 10% fewer. Swiss is school-wide information system. Those are the office referral forms. I'd like to have 10% fewer office referral forms this year than last year. And I believe the way we will get there is through the introduction and implementation of classroom discussion circles. I'll talk more about that, and improve, again, consistency and fidelity to school-wide behavior expectations by our staff. The name of the game this year is consistency. I'm now going to present some information, first academic and then behavioral. So academic response to intervention at TWK DMS. So there are 3 tiers. So the first tier has to do with the classroom level and what is school-wide. So my entire school has an eligibility check every 2 weeks. It's not just for the athletes. We do it school-wide. There are a lot of school incentives tied to your eligibility. You cannot attend a dance at Derigo Middle School unless you are eligible. And the principal personally delivers to you information when you are not eligible. So I have a conversation with every kid who's failing a class at least once every 2 weeks. We use universal screening assessments of our own, the Easy CBM grade level benchmark assessments, so that no matter what is changed above us, we have something consistent that we can make our decisions on. They're also shorter assessments. And then we have access to additional in-class support in reading or math for all 7th and 8th grade students, which I mentioned earlier. Tier 2, so this would be sort of in addition to regular education support. We have tutoring that's available outside of the school day. I think right now I have 3 students taking advantage of that. That number always goes up right before the end of the trimester. We have 45 minutes daily RTI for all 6th grade students that they're identified for that support based on their Easy CBM results, as well as teacher recommendation. And then we have ELA and math interventionists working with students identified during period 8, if they're in the 7th or 8th grade, which I kind of spoke about already. And then tier 3 is highly specialized. So this can be like special education. So specially designed instruction is something that's offered in special education. We have a couple programs that are available to us. And then if that's not your issue, but you're not meeting expectations, you can hang out with me in July because we have mandatory summer school. And I was once asked what makes it mandatory. And the answer is I will come to your house if you're not coming to mine. And so I have some figures there. We've had success with middle school, summer school. Yeah. Okay, next one. So I had intended to present some information based on the new state's assessment, the main 3-year assessment. And you can see up there, there is a generic score level band. I am still coming to terms with how to interpret and understand the new state assessment. And we have been asked to not share the preliminary statewide averages as of yet. So I can't. However, it's worth noting that in math, all 3 of the middle school's grade levels, we fell within the yellow band, and the same goes for the state average. And ELA, all middle school grade levels fell within the green band for reading. The same goes for the state averages. It is difficult for me to extrapolate clear meaning on the scale scores or the data itself. It's a totally new test. And we kind of dug into that a little bit at the curriculum committee meeting. And if you've had any questions, you can see me or Brad, and we can talk more about that. And then the 3-year assessments, RIT scores, which is what we traditionally used for analysis, do seem lower than what the regular NUIA RIT scores had been. They are 2 completely different tests. The main 3-year assessment is a criterion-based test. If you're an 8th grader, there are certain 8th grade questions you have to answer, whereas the old version was a diagnostic and it was completely adaptive to whatever the level of the student was. I don't know. I just know that we've been told officially not to compare previous RIT scores to these new RIT scores. So I'm still trying to wrap my head around how to use that. Next slide. We've been using Easy CBM for 4 or 5 years now. These are much shorter assessments. And there's like a battery in reading and a battery in math. And each one is short and there are more than one test, and we give them in September because the state has us hold off until October for the NWEAs, but we want to get our intervention groups going ASAP. And so what you can see here is that this September, our math baselines, a little more than 25% of our students were identified as high need. A little less than 25% of our students were identified as low need. And then the middle 50% were identified as some need. And that means a lot of different things, depending on if what got you into that category is your score on the basic math test or the math proficiency test, because they measure two different things. In general, these figures are similar to last year. However, the incoming cohort of new sixth graders had a much higher percentage of students identified at risk. And the outgoing eighth grade, that's now in the ninth grade, had a higher percentage of kids who were low need. So it did shift things in that direction a little bit, but that's why the difference in those two cohorts. Next slide, please. Similarly in reading, I won't read it to you, but we have a larger number of students who fall in the low need category. But in general, again, these figures are similar to last year with the same caveat that our incoming class had more students who are high risk and the outgoing class had fewer. Next slide, please. And summer school. So I've been tracking this because it is a goal of mine to not only create the expectation around summer school. Summer school doesn't have to be a punishment, like stuff happens. And I want kids to get used to the idea that you're going to be held accountable to do it. And I'm not going to get mad at you over it, but you have to do it. And so for me, the most important figure is that DNC. That DNC means did not complete. So when we started the summer, because there was no middle school summer school before 2020, we started the middle school summer school. The only way you got into summer school is if you failed a core class. So there were 23 kids who were eligible for that. 6 refused to do it. In 21, it was the same rules, but it was all 3 trimesters, not just the last trimester. We had a huge number. We had 54 kids eligible, and we had 5 refuse to do it out of a larger number. So that was improvement. Then in 2022, it was any trimester, any class period. And we had a smaller number, 34, and only 3 did not complete. And then this past year, it was the same criteria, but we had more kids require summer school, but we had no kids refuse to do it, which is not entirely true. There was one student who refused to do it. That student had moved to a different school district, so I couldn't get them. But yeah, I think we've established an expectation, and that's a little win. Next slide, please. All right, so now to the behavior side of the house. Once again, we have 3 tiers of approach. There's the school-wide approach. So we have school-wide expectations posted throughout the school. Whoop, yep. As kind of a fun, positive thing as part of PBIS, which is positive behavior intervention and supports. We have these cougar paws, these little blue cougar paws. They're think of it as sort of caught being good kind of a thing that's been around forever. When a student is identified, the teacher will write a little note on there. They give them the paw. They come down to the office so that getting in trouble isn't the only reason you come to the office. They'll come down. We celebrate them, hoot, hoot, holler, put it in a basket. And then every Friday we have a little raffle at the end of lunch. Kids win a prize. And then we collect all the positive things on a cork board and a bulletin board. And then every time the bulletin board is filled, we have a big celebration day. There's a lot of emphasis on the wrong behaviors. So we try to celebrate the right behaviors. We also will have occasional teacher facilitated circle conversations about classroom dynamics. That is an attempt to have more conflict resolution happening at the classroom level, not all exclusively at the office level. And then there's nothing more important than teacher home communication. And we've asked our staff to document all the minor behavior concerns, even if they're the ones who are going to handle them. And we've built the system now so that all minors are reviewed by my social worker so that he can then identify if there are patterns. Whereas before, teachers were filling out the minors, but there was no one really analyzing those until like months later. So he's analyzing them in real time and then letting me know if he's a pattern. Tier 2, obviously, we are blessed to have a social worker and a nurse, and we offer referrals as needed to those kiddos who need some extra support. And then there are the major office referrals, and every major office referral I handle personally. Even if it's a situation where the teacher wants to be involved, I read every and I address every major behavior. It takes up a considerable amount of my time, but it's important. And then we have check and check out behavior plans. And so that is I can talk more about it if you want me to, but it's basically an individualized behavior plan that students have that tracks their progress through the day. We use it as a communication tool and to focus on where the correction ought to be. Yes.
How many on check in, check out?
I have it
Roughly.
I have it a couple slides from now, so I don't want to guess and get it wrong, but I know it's coming up. Quite a few. And then our highly specialized tier, we have students with individual crisis management plans. That's something that I'm qualified to write because I'm TCI trained. TCI stands for Therapeutic Crisis Intervention. And then we make outside referrals to every manner of agency. All right. So I mentioned those facilitated circles. This is an initiative that we've undertaken this year at the middle school. This is a quote from George Conant. Maybe some of you know George. He worked in the Dirigo schools for a long time. He's went out there and all sorts of people pay him all sorts of money to be a consultant for restorative practices. He is donating his time to the middle school. I met him years ago when I was an assistant principal, and he said, if you ever want to work with me, I won't charge you. So I took him up on it coming into this year. We had a lot of new hires, and the timing felt right to make a change. This is, I've had some comments, and so I'll just say this. Restorative justice, restorative practices, depending on who you talk to, you may get a different answer. Here's what restorative work is at the middle school. And I contacted George and I asked him to encapsulate it. What we're doing is centered around relationship building and helping students recognize when their words or action have done harm and what they will do to repair it. It's not what they should do to repair it, what they will do to repair it. It's about accountability to your peers, accountability to the community. There is no curriculum of questions that has been adopted to guide a particular type of conversation in classrooms. This is a practice. Please click the button. And one of the things that I've read online is a lot of pushback, and I understand it. You know, instead of traditional consequences, you're just having conversations in a circle. That's not accountability. That's not discipline. Yeah, well, that wouldn't be really restorative practices either. Restorative practices are about restoring things. It's making amends. It's accountability. You just give a kiddo a detention for what they did, and there's never a conversation with the person they harmed. You're left with a grudge. So it's not one or the other, it's both. So to prove it, I thought I would just put up the number of detentions. The start of the year until this day, last year, I had given out 15 detentions, 8 out of school suspensions, 4 in-school suspensions, and I hadn't done anything officially restorative officially. This year so far, I've got 14 detentions, 6 out of school suspensions, 2 in-school suspensions, and I've had 4 incidents that warranted an intentional, take your time. I had parents in the meeting, conversation between kids about what happened and trying to bury the hatchet, right the wrong, restore the relationship, and darn it, get along or at least have an understanding. So the most common consequence for a major referral is a conference with me and I contact home. The number of major referrals this year was really high in September, which is not a surprise because they were really high all last year, which is part of why I gave George a call. But that number has begun to decline now in comparison to last year. And I attribute that in part to our efforts to settle conflict and greater teacher consistency. Please click the button. So this is kind of a weird way to look at the data, but there you have it. So the blue bars are September. The red bars are October. And you can see before COVID, it's the average behavior referrals per day. So my average day in September in 2019, I had a little over 4, maybe 4.5 referrals per day. And then that number went up in October. It always goes up in October. Then we didn't have very many kids in school anymore. And so the figure therefore was a lot smaller in 2020 and 2021. And then we came back to school in the fall of 2022. And things went haywire very quickly. Last year was a tough behavioral year at the middle school. And I'll just leave it at that for now. We tried a lot of different things. We learned a lot of things, and I think we came out the other end stronger. That jump from September to October, if that looks like a lot to you, I lived it. It was a lot. Then this year, we came in higher than last year, which isn't a shock because we ended last year higher. We came in still at that point. What I'm feeling good about is that the figures this October are an improvement compared to last October. And it's starting to normalize to what it was in 2019. Do I think 2019 is good enough? No. But I'm feeling okay about the trend. Here's another thing, and I don't mean to be harsh, but so I have 18 students currently on check and check out. I have 6 more than last year at this time. And I have 5 students on I misspelled that. It should be individual crisis management plan. That's quite a few. I have some students with some very meaningful needs. Please click the button. So here's the thing, right? This is always the thing. 10 students, 8 are in the 8th grade, 2 are in the 7th grade. 10 students are responsible for 55% of all major referrals in the school. They all have check and check out, don't you worry. And 5 students, all of whom are in the 8th grade, make up a third of all the referrals school-wide. You may recall I mentioned having a certain number of crisis management plans. So I am not going to be able to just use restorative practices and traditional consequences to solve all of the problems that creates that behavior. But I believe that the kids who aren't in trouble, the kids who have been around this for the last 3 years, they need to have a voice too. I need to equip and empower them to stand up for themselves. And I believe that the restorative circle approach is a common sense way to give the voice back to the kids who aren't seeking attention, but have been putting up with a lot for too long. I can keep suspending kids, I have been, but I need to empower their peers to stand up for what's right. And I believe being intentional about having a conversation about what just happened and why it's not okay is worthwhile. Please click the button. Now the fun stuff. So we've got a lot of great clubs and activities. The picture off there to the right is from our technology club meeting after school. We have a student council. We have a speech and debate club. Their numbers are up. I've seen 8 or 10 students in that room after school, which is exciting. We have our arts and crafts club, which has gotten off the ground. They've had about 10 students, and you recently passed that job description for us, and inviting community folks in is part of the job description, and I know that that will happen. We have a civil rights team. We have the Positive Cougar Club, which is like an anti-bullying, positive messaging club. They do a lot of fundraisers and community work. Our 8th grade class helpers, they're raising all kinds of money for the 8th grade. We're going to take a fun trip this year. I can feel it. We have a band, the Dixfield Rec. It's not a school football program, but they're all my kids. So the Dixfield Rec football team, and they are crushing it again. We have a chorus, we have a yearbook, we have a drama club, we have that technology club. Our field hockey team is getting deep in the playoffs right now. Our cross country team is still performing very well. And we have boys and girls soccer. This is a blessing. There aren't a lot of small schools that have that many opportunities for kids. And I'm proud of that, because I think everyone in middle school should have a place where they can feel like they fit in. And I think we do a good job offering that. It's very important. Next button. School events. So what have we done? We had our 6th grade orientation and our activity fair. We had our annual open house with 70% of the parents came. That is in part because I don't let a kid take a laptop home unless you've come every year to watch my tech safety presentation. Yeah, I'm glad you liked it. Our PTO had its school swag fundraiser. I think there are a dozen kids who sold enough that they're going to pie me in the face in a couple of weeks. Our student council had their elections. They're up and running. The 8th grade class raised thousands of dollars off some raffles. We completed our 3-year NWEA. We just had a Halloween themed dance on Friday. That's the conga line. And we're in a spirit week right now. Click the button. Some of our community connections, that's a personal goal of mine. We're inviting community members in, as well as trying to provide services to our community. So we've had some financial literacy presentations. We have a trimester class all 7th graders have to take on personal finance. The Oxford Federal Credit Union came in. We've had a bunch of guest speakers for 8th grade capstone. You can see Deputy Wainwright down there being interviewed by some students on their policy project. We've had a homeless shelter donation project using some of the older clothes from the Cougar Den. And the gifted and talented student body has been working with some local leaders to not only restore a local cemetery, but to begin to create a web page that documents all of the folks who are in that cemetery and what they can gather from ancestry.com and other places, and create something to share with the Maine History Network. Yeah. And what's coming? So we've got our book fair that's starting on the 30th. Our parent teacher conferences are on the 2nd and the 8th. 6 a.m. tomorrow, our online sign-up process begins for that. It's a first come, first serve way so that parents can see any teacher they want. Our annual Veterans Luncheon and Assembly will be on the 9th. Those invitations went home today. I am looking at you, Tina. Good. We will have a coordinated Alice drill. That was also in a letter that went home. That will happen in a few weeks in November. Our Positive Cougar Club annual food drive is soon to start, and then the first trimester will be over before you know it. Click the button. Go Cougars. Any questions about life at the middle school these days? Yes, ma'am.
On the restorative end, can you give an example of what you consider a restorative situation?
Sure.
Yeah. I don't know
Sure.
what to say.
I'll use an example of something that happened this year. I had a 6th grade student come to me with tears in her eyes because she was called a racial slur. I met with a student who had conducted it, had done it. To his credit, he admitted it. Conversation, it became clear that this had been something that they had done before, not necessarily in front of teachers, but it wasn't the first time he had used that language. They hang out. They hang out outside of school. Their families would do stuff. I don't think he understood the full effect of his choices on this student. And I don't think this student felt confident enough to stand up for what was right. I was really lucky because I called both parents before I did it, that both parents were behind the idea of this conversation taking place. I invited both parents to come. I sat there at the table with these two students and both their parents, and I facilitated a conversation of what was the harm that was done. And that young person had to hear and be held accountable to, in addition to his traditional consequence, hear and be held accountable to how his actions affected someone. And that person who had been harmed had an opportunity to feel empowered. And the parents had an opportunity to say their piece as well in that case. And it hasn't happened again. I don't think you can suspend away every problem. But if you are able to bring students together, and if they're willing, that's the other piece. You can't force that, right? If he had lied, if he had denied it, if there was no sense of regret, it wouldn't be worth having that kind of a conversation because it's a huge investment of time to do it well. It was a 15, 20-minute conversation. Two parents, kid got out of work and came in. But if it works, it really works. So that would be an example.
Anything else for Jason? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Committee reports, student.
So football game has they just did their quarterfinals game, so now they're going to keep advancing on Friday. Girls soccer had their playoff game against Madison today. They lost. Field hockey went against Stearns and they won. And then boys soccer plays Telstar tomorrow for their playoff game. And I-times are going well in classrooms, and juniors had their PSATs today. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Am I good to go?
You are good to go home. Policy, I plan to meet the next November. Jason beat me for this day. Finance, Carl.
There's a meeting scheduled tentatively. It's on November 17th between 1 and 2 p.m. I think there might also already be a change in that. I'm not sure.
There is a change to that already. It's moved up to noon time so that everybody can make it.
12 o'clock.
Yep.
11:17.
No, that's finance, November 17th at noon.
Okay. Curriculum, Brad.
Where do I start? No, it's not that. First of all, I want to say, thank you, Jason. Yeah, and Charlie was there tonight, and we had a teacher, was it Beth Edwards, yes, for coming. It was really great that the whole presentation about the tier status was more in depth for us, and I would compliment Jason for his control here at this meeting tonight. Not that he was out of control, but he's very passionate about the information, as I think everyone is. And it sounds very frustrating. So what we heard here tonight is really, it's a surface level discussion around it. There's a lot more to it. And, the best way I understand it is, it just sounds like there's so many moving targets all the time that our teachers are probably performing miracles to just try to stay ahead of it. So thank you for that. We're also looking at social studies curriculum, and we're going to get a little bit more focused about some specific text, narrowing some things down, and then how do we make some decisions that are going to best suit the needs of the students here. So I think, is that safe to say that's about it? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Brad. No buildings and grounds.
Yep, I'm going to report on that if you
sorry.
don't mind. So we are going to meet November 3rd at 1 o'clock. And at that meeting, obviously, we'll have to vote on a chair for that committee. But November 3rd at 1 o'clock is when they'll meet here at the high school.
On negotiations, you'll know when tonight, right? It's on here. And personnel, Natalie.
Yep. So Personnel Committee met last week on the 18th. We reviewed policies around personnel management and hiring. There's one clause in particular in the policy on hiring that stipulates that the Personnel Committee should help foster a positive working environment. We had some conversation with Barb and with Pam that I don't really know that that's the appropriate role of the committee. Barb's going to do a bit more research on this, and I think have some, or maybe has already done some research on it, but we've left that with her at this stage to get some more background and clarification on why that was in the MSMA sample, and then probably have some discussion with policy on whether or not we keep that in. We reviewed athletic stipend job descriptions. Nick had gone through the job descriptions for coaching and athletic positions at both the middle school and the high school, not really providing any substantive changes, but getting them formatted in a way that was consistent, like from one to the other. And so we looked those over. The majority of those we thought looked good. By policy, we have to put those forward for the DEA to review as well. And as long as we've got a green light, then we'll bring those forward to the full board for review and approval at the next meeting. And we also had some discussion around job descriptions for AP, payroll, and HR. Although at the moment we do have one staff member in the district that's responsible for all three functions, they are three separate job descriptions. And we know that that's an area that we're going to be hiring in the not too distant future. So we decided as a committee, it's going to make sense to review those job descriptions, all three, just make sure that they're still current and relevant, and fit the duties that need to be performed. And so we want to make sure we get that review done before the end of the year. So at this point, looking at kind of frequency of meetings, it looks like every couple months is going to be sufficient to have a meeting and get covered what we need to. So we'll have our next meeting planned for January 9th at 5:30. So that gets us through the holidays, but do anticipate that we'll have some job descriptions and maybe some other things for the board to review between now and then.
Thank you, Natalie. I did research. MSMA doesn't have a sample. I went back because I gave away, I had books when 43 had their policy book reviewed by the lawyers. And I found that wording in their old policy. So now I know where it came from. And I think we had just adopted what they had, even though we worked hard on going through, but that was so. And since I'm going Thursday, I'm going to ask Charlotte, say, is there supposed to be one? What happened to it? Because sometimes they get rid of things.
Well, I think it's just prudent as a group that, if we're going to have a policy, then we ought to plan on following it. And when we know there's language in the policy that just doesn't seem pertinent, it's not, I don't think, an appropriate function. I think we're best to remove it, but I think it is good just to review and make sure that there isn't something that we're missing before we do that.
Yep. All right. Ad hoc committee. Did you guys meet, Jason? Okay. I thought I saw that because I know Larry was gone too. No, or you were back. I can't remember. Okay. Okay. All right. Board member comments. I put this on now. I'm hot. Go ahead, Larry.
Yeah, tonight I'm as a representative of the Mystic Valley Grange. I don't know if you're familiar with the Granges, but it's in East Dixfield. They're also known as the patron of husbandry, and I'm in the master there, and we had a discussion. The Granges have been around since 1873. Their initiation, they were very, very involved with local community and supported the local community and education. And we have been trying to figure out ways to get involved in the community. And one of the ways, I made a motion that we give money to RSU56 in the form of school supplies. And this will help, hopefully, it's going to be with all three schools, so fight as you will. But I talked to Pam and she gave me a list of things. And so we did buy some school supplies there in Pam's office right now. And what we got, it was 17 multicolored dry erasers, 30 black dry erasers, 11 3-ring binders, 41 poster boards, and 31 subject notebooks. And so we just felt an obligation to help out the school, and it'll help out the teachers a lot, because I know for a fact I spent a lot of money on school supplies. So I hope this helps out, and it was our pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? All right, seeing none, I'm going to enter into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA subsection 405D for discussion and consideration of the administrative contract. Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And a second? Roll call?
Dawn,
Yes.
Larry, Kathleen,
Yes.
Joy, Tim, Natalie,
Yes.
Barbara,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes.
Liz,
Yes.
Carl,
Yes.
Tina. Yes.
And I'll give a minute. So,
Barb, I'm gonna look I'm gonna log off this link and join on a different
Oh,
link.
that-
So I'll be back in just a minute.
Okay. Yep, It was 8:30. Okay. Oh, you're good. Oh, Lord. I was gonna make popcorn balls tonight. I'm too lazy. I got everything ready, but I'm not gonna do it. You like them? I already made one batch. Oh. You can have a question if about the contract. Okay, we are live. All right, once I get a motion, is it any? We did. It was 75,000 for the budget total. 3.
So you have the entire thing sent to you. So if you pull up your email, you can go right to the end of it and see the salaries from year to year.
And of course, we can't discuss
Okay.
those here.
We're good. All right, this is just a question before you start. I know our other people used to like digital. I'm a hard copy person. If you get it in your email, are you reading what you get or do you need a hard copy to read better?
I have an idea.
Okay,
What would make it easier for me to see it is when the emails come with important documents, they're spread out all through the email. I wonder if it makes any sense to have a board folder where you would place those documents. And I don't know if you break it down into subfolders,
can
but
you put it in
that way we know if it's in there, like we got to be viewing it, but I don't know if that'd be helpful.
we all have a drive with your Google.
That's what I mean. It's like she put it into a shared folder.
Once it's approved and then everyone. Oh, well, yeah, even before.
But if it was in a shared folder that only the board and us were part of, we'd be able to go in and go, if it's sitting there, I have to view that. And then I can sort it however I want to sort it after that.
Okay. What? No, well, see, I have it digital, but when I read it, I'm a stickler because I'm looking every word. All right, could I entertain a motion to approve, to make a motion about what we were discussing? the
You
contract?
need a motion?
Yes, I do. To accept the 3-year
What's the name of the contract?
administrative.
I make a motion that we approve the administrative contract.
Could I have a second? Comments or questions? You all set, Larry, down? Okay. I know we should, seeing that, we do not have to do roll call. All in favor? Opposed? When opposed, motion carries. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.